Well, my parents bought a ranch in British Columbia just after the war, and their idea was to make this a dude ranch. Because my father was kind of interested in the hospitality industry at the time. He'd actually gone to hotel school after the war, thinking that he wanted to work in that area. And it's so funny, really, that what he ended up doing was so different than that. Nevertheless, they were going to run this dude ranch, but of course they didn't have any money, so my father had to take a job in town. And then also he figured that if he logged the property, he could make some extra income as well. So in order to do so, he really had to start from scratch because he didn't have any way to get the logs out of the forest. So he did have horses on the property, however, and so he trained 3 of them to harness so they could pull the logs out of the forest. And then he bought one of the early portable chainsaws, 2-stroke chainsaws, and started logging. He'd had a lot of experience with horses, but I don't think he'd had too much experience with logging itself, although from being from Sweden, they were, most people were familiar, the men anyway, with log building and handling logs in the wintertime and so on. So my father knew that it could be done. So he just went ahead and did it and started logging the property. In the process, he discovered that he didn't know anything about sharpening chainsaws. And he was doing a really bad job at it, and he wasn't cutting very efficiently. So my father, his family, the Granbergs, there was a number of inventors in the family. 2 of his uncles were well-known inventors, actually. And so my father came up with a tool to sharpen the saws, to hold the file accurately so that you could duplicate the factory angles. And he made a prototype of that tool and sharpened his saws with it and discovered that it really made a big difference. He had a lot better cutting efficiency and so on. So he got excited about that. My mother had an uncle who had a little machine shop in his garage in Vancouver, and my father took the idea to him, and my mother's uncle helped him machine the first File-N-Joint prototype, and he showed it to several people, and they were impressed with it and its ability to sharpen chain. And that was really the beginning of the business. A few years later, he moved to California and worked for his uncle, who was a manufacturer, and learned about manufacturing. And then shortly after that, much to my mother's chagrin, because it was a good job that he had with his uncle, he decided to go out on his own. Borrowed a little money and had dies made for the File-N-Joint. And the first ones we put together in the basement of our house in Richmond. And then he started the long haul process of trying to sell this idea to people. And my father was a very outgoing person and very courageous in many ways about meeting people. He had no problem with that. So I think his initial efforts really got the product off the ground. There was a lot of problems at first. I remember him telling me about going to his first demonstration show, a logging show, and he had a little booth there, and he was demonstrating the product. He clamped the File-N-Joint on the chainsaw and went to sharpen it, and one of the parts didn't fit. So he pulled another one out of the box and had the same problem. So everyone that he tried had this production problem. So it was really, he felt terrible. And of course he couldn't demonstrate it. He had wasted money going to the show and everything. So when he got back to the shop, he really changed his production quality control procedures so that wouldn't happen again. And that was just one of the little learning curves involved with by someone who really didn't grow up with that process. He had to learn these things by himself. Because money was so tight, my father built most of the tooling to produce the File-N-Joint in the beginning. And he didn't know anything about that, but he learned. He went to night school and studied machining. My mother was a pretty good accountant, and so she helped him on the money side. And together, we rented a little shop in Richmond, about 800 square feet, and started making the File-N-Joint there. And he sold a few, and was well accepted, and that's the way it started.